It's just another one of your pathetic little events, my mother snapped over the phone. Hayden has his senior day game this Saturday. You understand, right? Real family comes first. I didn't argue. I didn't tell her what that little event actually was. I simply said, okay, skip it, and hung up. 2 days later, I married the orthopedic surgeon who operated on my brother's shoulder in 2023. The same surgeon whose name my mother used to brag about to all her friends. She chose to watch my brother sit on the bench instead of walking me down the aisle. At 11:47 p.m. that night, after one single Instagram story, my phone exploded. 17 missed calls by 2 a.m. She wasn't calling to apologize. She was calling because she finally realized exactly who I married, and what kind of evidence he had been holding for years. My name is Brooke Palmer. I'm 30 years old. Welcome back to Revenge Episodes. This is where we share stories about family betrayal, quiet strength, and the moment someone finally says enough. If this story hits close to home, drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. Let me tell you what happened next. The phone call came in at 7:14 p.m. on a Thursday, March 12, 2026. I was standing in the rental hall of Cornerstone Chapel in Franklin, Tennessee, finishing the seating chart for 50 people. The wedding coordinator, Margot, was on the other side of the room, taping floor markers for the procession. I had a glass of water in one hand and a black felt-tip pen in the other. When my mother's name lit up the screen, I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. I answered because of muscle memory. 28 years of muscle memory. "Sweetheart," she said, and I could already hear the verdict in the first word. Hayden made the SEC senior weekend roster. The coach said he might even start. Saturday afternoon. We can't drive down. You understand, right? Family. I looked down at the seating chart. There were 2 cards in the front row of the bride's side. One said, Mother of the Bride. The other was blank. The space where my stepfather's name should have gone had been crossed out a week earlier, when I realized he was no longer relevant to the ceremony or to my life. I didn't say any of that to her. I said, okay, skip it. There was a small pause, the kind of pause she used when she expected me to push back so she could call me dramatic. Don't be like that, honey. It's just one of your little events. We'll make it up to you later. Okay? I'll call you next week. We can get lunch. Okay. I have to go. I hung up before she could say anything else. Then I walked to the seating chart and pulled the Mother of the Bride card off the front row. I held it in my hand for a moment. Margot saw me from across the room and lifted her chin in question. Do you want me to leave the seats? She asked. Leave one. For my father. She nodded once. She didn't ask why I was using the singular. Some seats are easier to fill than others, she said, and went back to her floor markers. I drove home that night to the apartment Owen and I had been sharing for 14 months. He was in the kitchen, making dinner. I told him I'd just talked to my mother. Did you tell her? He asked. I told her enough. He didn't ask me to clarify. He never did. That was one of the first things I noticed about him. Hayden was a walk-on utility infielder at Vanderbilt. SEC home opener weekend in baseball means the first conference series of the year. A Saturday afternoon game that mattered to a coach who had never started my brother and wasn't going to start him this time either. My mother didn't know that. She believed every weekend was the one. She had believed that for 16 years. That night, I opened my email and scrolled back to the save the date I'd sent her on January 9th. The read receipt was on. She'd opened it. She hadn't replied. The card sat on her refrigerator under a magnet shaped like a baseball bat. I closed the laptop. I didn't tell Owen what I'd just confirmed. I went to sleep. I want to back up. Because if you only heard that phone call, you'd think I was cruel for not correcting her. You'd think I should have just said, Mom, it's my wedding. I want to tell you why I didn't. When I was 23, I had a boyfriend named Caleb. We'd been together for 9 months. He was kind. He listened. He told me his parents wanted to meet me. I was going to move into his apartment in Brentwood. I made the mistake of telling my mother. I made it because she had just called me, all warm, asking what was new. I wanted to give her something. I wanted to be the kind of daughter who had good news to share with her mother on a Sunday afternoon. She called Caleb the next day. I didn't know that until later. She told him I was going through a hard time. She said she was worried about my mental stability. She said I had a history of overreaching in relationships. She said it the way she said everything. Concerned, soft, almost reluctant. Caleb broke up with me 3 weeks later. He said the timing wasn't right. He said he needed to focus on his career. I didn't find out what really happened until 2020, when Caleb sent me a Facebook message out of nowhere. He said he'd been thinking about me. He said he was sorry. He said, "Your mother told me things I shouldn't have believed." That was the moment I made my rule. I wrote it in a notebook I kept in my desk drawer. I still have the notebook. Don't tell her anything she can use. I followed that rule for 6 years. But that rule didn't start with Caleb. Caleb just gave it a name. It started when I was 14. That spring, the Franklin Rotary Club gave me a regional academic scholarship. It was $1,200 and a handshake at a luncheon. I had won it for an essay I'd written about civic responsibility. The ceremony was on a Saturday morning in May. The principal had said in his letter, "We hope your parents will be in attendance." The Saturday of the ceremony, Hayden had a Pop Warner game. He was 10. He played safety. He'd been playing safety since he was 7. My mother sat me down on the Thursday before and said, "Honey, you can pick up your award next week, can't you? Hayden only gets 1 Saturday." I said, "Okay." I drove myself to the luncheon. I didn't have a license. My grandmother drove me. She wore a dress my mother had given her 2 birthdays earlier. When the principal handed me the check, he leaned in and said, "Tell your parents we're proud of them too." I said, "I will." I didn't. When I got home, my mother was on the phone with my aunt, recounting Hayden's interception. She didn't ask about the luncheon. She didn't ask how the speech went. She didn't ask if my grandmother had liked the chicken. That night, in my room, I wrote down a sentence on the inside cover of a school notebook. I was 14. I didn't know it would matter. Don't expect her to come. I followed that sentence in some form for 16 years. When I was 17, I was the salutatorian at my high school graduation. I gave a 4-minute speech. My mother left in the middle to take Hayden to a tournament 3 hours away. She told me later she'd watched the video. She hadn't. There was no video. The school had stopped recording graduations in 2010 because of a budget cut. I knew that because I'd been on the yearbook committee. When I was 20, I made Dean's List for the 4th straight semester at the University of Tennessee. I didn't tell her. When I was 22, I got my first job offer in hospital administration. I called my father. By the time I was 23, I had built a wall I didn't know I was building. Caleb knocked it down for a minute. My mother put it back up. I rebuilt the rest of it myself. You learn, after enough years, that some people don't want to know you. They want to know what to do with you. The first person who ever changed that rule was Owen. I told him everything. About the credit card numbers I would later learn she'd opened in my name during college, about Caleb, about the scholarship lunch, about Hayden's recruiting visits, about being asked to be helpful with every birthday card that needed addressing and every gas tank that needed filling. Owen listened without interrupting. He didn't try to fix anything. He just listened. The way I have learned, since, that men who become surgeons listen, like the room belongs to whoever is bleeding. When I was done, he said one thing. You don't owe people the version of yourself they refuse to learn. I have a feeling he didn't know that I'd remember that sentence for the rest of my life. I met Owen in September of 2023 in a surgical consult room at Vanderbilt Sports Medicine. Hayden had torn the labrum in his right shoulder. Throwing motion, my mother said over the phone like she'd been reading a medical chart. Catcher's injury. Common, the trainer says. Common. She told me I had to take him to the consult. She had to work. She always had to work when something was inconvenient. I drove down from Nashville. Hayden was 19, hungover, wearing a Vanderbilt hoodie inside out. He sat in the chair next to me in the waiting room and looked at his phone. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask if I'd driven far. He never did. When they called us in, I took out an index card from my wallet. I always carried index cards. Habit from work. The doctor walked in. He was 31 then, lean, dark hair, a clean white coat over scrubs. He shook my hand before he shook Hayden's. Dr. Owen Caldwell, he said. Brooke, his sister. He glanced at Hayden, then back at me. You're the one who's going to make sure he does this, aren't you? I wrote Dr. Owen Caldwell at the top of the index card. Apparently, I said. He explained the surgery. Labrum repair. Outpatient. 6 weeks in a sling. 12 PT sessions minimum. Non-negotiable for full recovery. I wrote every word. Hayden looked at his phone the whole time. Once, when Owen asked him a direct question, "Have you had any prior shoulder injuries?" Hayden looked up, blinked, and said, "I don't know. My mom would know." He was 19 years old. He didn't know his own medical history. Owen wrote that down too. When the consult was over, he handed me a single page. Discharge instructions, signed on a printed letterhead. Vanderbilt Sports Medicine Post-Operative Plan. Patient, Hayden Palmer. PT Protocol, 12 sessions, completed at Vanderbilt Sports Medicine PT, or pre-approved external provider with documented referral. He'd circled the words pre-approved external provider. Just in case, he said, some patients want to do it closer to home. I put the page in my purse. I put the index card in my purse on top of it. I didn't think about either of them for a long time. In the parking lot afterwards, Hayden lit a cigarette. He'd told my mother he had quit. He hadn't quit. He blew smoke out the side of his mouth and said, "She gonna be mad I missed practice for this?" I said, "Probably not." He said, "Cool." He got in the passenger seat and put his earbuds in. We drove the 4 hours back to Nashville in silence. He fell asleep with his mouth open. When I dropped him off at the dorm, he said, "Thanks for the ride." That was it. I drove the rest of the way to my apartment thinking about how Owen had asked Hayden a direct question, and Hayden had answered, "My mom would know." I didn't know yet that my mom did know, and that she was already deciding what to do about it. The surgery was on September 28th, 2023. My mother arrived in the parking lot 30 minutes before they wheeled Hayden back. She was wearing a Vanderbilt baseball jersey she didn't earn the right to wear, and she had a thermos of coffee in her hand. She posted a photo of herself in the waiting room to Facebook before they'd even prepped him. Praying for my boy. Football family forever. Wait. Baseball family forever. #BlessedMom. She fixed the typo 6 minutes later. She left after an hour. She said she had to get back to Brentwood for a dental staff meeting. There was no staff meeting. I was the one who sat in the chair for 8 hours. I was the one Dr. Caldwell came to find when the surgery ended. He stood by the chair and talked to me for 15 minutes. He drew a small diagram on the back of his clipboard. He said the labrum repair had gone clean. He said the PT window started in 2 weeks. He said, "Your mother left." It wasn't a question. "She had a meeting," I said. He looked at me. He didn't argue. A week later, my mother posted a Facebook status that I screenshotted and didn't save. I didn't need to save it. I remembered every word. So grateful to Dr. Owen Caldwell at Vanderbilt Sports Medicine for taking such good care of my boy. Top orthopedic surgeon in Tennessee. Hashtag blessed mom, hashtag baseball mom. The post got 92 likes. That post is going to matter later. I remember reading it on my couch that night and thinking how strange it was that she could spell his name correctly on Facebook, but had never spelled mine correctly on a birthday card. Brooke is 5 letters. She wrote Brooke on every card she ever gave me until I was 26 and pointed it out. She said, "Honey, don't be petty." I stopped getting cards. Hayden didn't go to PT. I called him after week 2. He said, yeah, he was on it. I called him after week 4. He said he was doing exercises at home. I called Dr. Caldwell's office on week 6 and asked if they could pull his scheduling history. The receptionist said they had no record of him scheduling. She asked if he'd been referred externally. I said I didn't know. I didn't ask my mother. That was the rule. I called Hayden one more time, week 7. He picked up on the 4th ring. There was music in the background. He sounded fine. "Hey, are you doing your PT?" "Yeah, I'm good. Shoulder feels great." "Did you go to the appointments?" "Mom set something up. I don't know. I'm fine." "Hayden, did you actually go?" He paused. "Brooke, it's covered. Don't worry about it. The trainer cleared me last week." The trainer hadn't cleared him. There was no trainer. He was 19 and lying badly to his older sister at 6 in the evening on a Tuesday. And I knew it, and I let it go. I put the discharge sheet in the bottom drawer of my desk at the apartment in Nashville. I put the index card on top of it. I told myself he was an adult. It wasn't my body. I told myself the same thing for 2.5 years. I want to be honest about that. I let it go because letting things go was the only way I'd survived being in that family. If I had asked, my mother would have spun something. She would have said Hayden was doing PT with a friend who was a trainer. She would have said he was doing it himself. She would have said it was none of my business. Then she would have called my father and told him I was being controlling, and my father wouldn't have answered because my father had already left. I didn't know yet why my father had left. I would find out in March of 2026. I want to tell you about Owen, because the story doesn't make sense without him. In October of 2024, his office called me about a billing question. Hayden had a credit balance from the surgery. They needed a forwarding address. Owen, for some reason, called me himself instead of letting his admin handle it. We talked for 40 minutes. At the end of the call, he said, "I told myself I'd ask if I ever saw you again. I didn't expect a billing question to be the reason." We met for coffee a week later. I didn't tell my mother. We started dating in November. I didn't tell my mother. He met my father at a barbecue in Knoxville in February of 2025. My father shook his hand for a long time and said, "Good." I didn't tell my mother any of that either. I want to tell you something about that barbecue, because it mattered. My father had not asked me beforehand what Owen did for a living. He had asked me only one question on the phone 3 days before we drove up. He'd asked, "Does he listen?" I'd said yes. He'd said, "Okay, bring him." That was the whole interview. When we got there, my father was in the backyard, turning chicken on a small charcoal grill. Owen walked over and stood next to him without asking. He stood there for almost a full minute. Then he said, "I haven't had real charcoal in a long time." My father said, "City life?" Owen said, "Mostly." They didn't talk for a while after that. They just stood there. 2 men, 1 grill, no performance. Later, after we ate, my father walked Owen to the truck. They were out there for maybe 10 minutes. I watched through the kitchen window. They weren't talking the whole time. They were leaning against the tailgate. At one point, my father pointed at something in the yard. Owen nodded. When Owen came back inside, he didn't tell me what they talked about. It wasn't until much later, after the folder, after Knoxville, after everything that my father told me. He said, I asked him if he knew what he was getting into. Not with you, with her. He said he had a folder too. He'd known. Owen had known. He'd been carrying the same thing my father had been carrying, and neither one of them had told me, because both of them had been waiting for me to come to the conclusion on my own. In December of 2025, on a Saturday morning, in the kitchen of the apartment we shared, Owen asked me to marry him. He didn't get on one knee. He didn't film it for social media. He just said, I'd like to spend the rest of my life with you, if you'd like that too. I said yes. He said, what kind of wedding do you want? I said, small, March, no big season, no drama, just us and the people who showed up the whole time. He said, okay. We sent 50 save the dates in January. I sent one to my mother. She opened it. She put it on her refrigerator under a magnet shaped like a baseball bat. She did not call. She did not text. 3 weeks later, when I called her to mention an event on March 14th, she said, yeah, just send me the address closer to the day. I didn't send her the address. I didn't lie to her. I just didn't correct her. There is a difference between hiding something and refusing to hand someone a weapon. If you've ever known that difference, you know exactly what I mean. On the morning of March 14th, 2026, I woke up at 6:13 a.m. in an Airbnb 4 miles from the chapel. I made coffee. I stood by the window. No one needed me. For the first time in a long time, my Saturday was mine. My phone buzzed at 6:40. My father. On the road. 2 hours out. Wearing the tie. The tie was his father's. Navy with a thin gold stripe. He'd worn it once before, at my college graduation when my mother had stayed home with Hayden because Hayden had a tournament. My father arrived at 9:30 with 3 flowers from his yard in Knoxville, 2 magnolias, and a single white lily. He held them out to me with both hands, the way you hold something you've been carrying carefully for a long time. Your mother had a magnolia tree once, he said. When you were little, she didn't like you touching it. I figured you should have something from yours. I took the flowers. I didn't cry. I didn't really know why I didn't cry. He handed me a small envelope. White. No writing on it. Open this later, he said. Not now. Later. I put it in my purse. I went upstairs to get ready. Margot zipped my dress. I stood in front of the small mirror in the bridal suite and breathed out once. Some brides cry, Margot said. Some brides exhale. I exhaled. When she opened the hallway door, my father was standing there, polishing his shoes with a handkerchief. If you've ever sat in a room your family forgot to enter, you know what kind of silence I'm describing. Subscribe. There are more stories like this one, and they all end the same way, with a woman choosing herself. The ceremony started at 2 p.m. 50 people. The front row on the bride's side had 1 filled chair and 1 empty one. The empty one had no card on it. I had asked Margot to remove the card. The chair stayed. My father walked me down the aisle. Halfway down, he leaned toward my ear and said, I'm proud of you. I should have said it more. I had never heard those words from him in that order. Owen was waiting at the altar. He was smiling the way he smiled in surgical consults, like someone who already knew the outcome and trusted the work. The vows were short. I read 4 sentences. Owen read 5. The 5th sentence of his was the one I held on to. You taught me that love isn't proven by who shows up loudest. It's proven by who shows up at all. We signed the marriage license. My father was a witness. He pressed the pen into the paper hard, like he wanted to make sure it stayed. At the reception, at 5:30 p.m., Owen stood up to give a toast. He held his glass low. He spoke quietly, the way he speaks when he's about to say something he's planned. My wife shows up for everyone, he said. Her family, strangers, my patients, especially my patients. There's a young man in this state who has a working shoulder because Brooke wrote his recovery plan on an index card 3 years ago in my consult room. She didn't have to. She does anyway. That's who she is. A few people laughed gently. A few people clapped. My cousin Megan, who'd flown in from Atlanta, took out her phone and recorded the last 15 seconds of the toast. She posted it to her Instagram story at 11:42 p.m. that night. My father stood up after Owen sat down. He didn't tap his glass. He didn't clear his throat. He just stood. And the room got quiet. He said, "I'm not going to give a speech. I want to say one thing. Brooke, you waited a long time to be seen. You should not have had to wait this long. I'm sorry it took me this long to say it out loud, and I'm grateful to be here to say it now." He sat down. He drank from his water glass. He did not look at me, because he knew if he did, he would not be able to keep his face still. I checked my phone for the first time at 11:30. When I did, there were no calls from my mother. I put the phone face down on the table. I went back to dancing with my husband. At 11:47 p.m., Owen handed me his phone. He had been scrolling. He didn't say anything. He just turned the screen toward me. It was Megan's Instagram story, a short clip of Owen's toast. The caption, "My cousin Brooke married a good one today. Dr. Owen Caldwell. You better take care of her. #Caldwell Wedding." March 14th, 2026. I looked at it for maybe 4 seconds. I said, "She just figured out the name." Owen said, "Are you okay?" I said, "I think I finally am." My phone rang at 11:51 p.m. Mom. I didn't answer. I put the phone face down on the nightstand. The vibration kept going. It stopped. Then it started again at 11:53. Then 11:55. Then 11:58. A text came through at 12:04 a.m. Brooke pickup. At 12:08, my brother called. First time in 6 months. He left a voicemail. I listened to it later. His voice was slurred. "Brooke, hey, listen. Mom is freaking out. She says, like, your husband is my doctor? Did you marry my doctor? That's like weird. Call her back, okay? She's losing it. She was losing it. I understood why before he did." The calls kept coming. 12:14. Voicemail 2 seconds long. Just breathing. 12:30. Voicemail 11 seconds. "Brooke, pick up. Please." 12:47. Voicemail 20 seconds. "I just need to know one thing. Is he still seeing patients from 2023? Please." 1:02. No voicemail, just a call. 1:18. Text. "I'm sorry I missed your event." "I am. Please call me." She had still not used the word wedding. 1:34 a.m. A new text. "Brooke, this is urgent. This is about Hayden, please." 1:47 a.m. Voicemail, 46 seconds. This one I played twice. I want you to hear it. "Brooke, please. I need to know if Owen has looked at anything from Hayden's recovery records. Anything from 2023. Anything at all. Just tell me. I can explain everything. I never meant for any of this to look the way it looks. Please." 1:58 a.m. The last call. I read the texts. I didn't answer any of them. Owen sat down next to me on the edge of the bed. The lights were off in the rest of the suite. I had my wedding dress draped over the chair by the closet. The bouquet was on the dresser, 2 magnolias and a lily. I said, "She's not calling because she missed it." He said, "Then why?" I said, "She's calling because she's scared of what you know." He said, "What do I know?" I said, "I'm going to find out on Monday. If you've ever realized your mother was scared of you instead of for you, there's a name for that moment. Stay with me. The story changes from here." I turned my phone back on Monday morning, March 16th. 17 missed calls, 12 voicemails, 23 texts. I sat at the kitchen island with my coffee and listened to all 12 voicemails in order. I put them on speaker. Owen was at the hospital. The apartment was quiet except for her voice. The first one, 11:53 p.m., was calm. "Honey, call me when you can. I think there's been a misunderstanding. We need to talk about Hayden." She had led with Hayden. "On the night of my wedding," in her first sentence. The second one was sharper. "Brooke, this is your mother. Pick up the phone. We need to discuss something time-sensitive." The fourth one started to crack. "Brooke, please, I just need to know one thing. Does Owen still have access to Hayden's records? Just answer me that." The seventh one was after midnight. "I'm not going to keep apologizing. I told you the senior weekend was important. You knew that. But honey, please, I need to know what your husband has looked at. I need to know." The ninth one, 1:47 a.m., was different. She wasn't yelling anymore. She was breathing too fast. "Brooke, please, I need to know if Owen has looked at anything from Hayden's recovery records. Anything from 2023. Anything at all. Just tell me. I can explain everything. I never meant for any of this to look the way it looks. Please." I played the ninth one twice. I wrote down 3 words on a sticky note. Insurance, records, explain. The 10th voicemail was even quieter. "Brooke, I'm your mother. Please, if you ever loved me, please call." The 11th was 4 seconds. Just her saying my name. The 12th was the longest. 2 minutes, 31 seconds. She talked about my childhood. She talked about how hard she'd worked. She talked about Hayden's surgery and how she'd been the one who arranged everything afterward. She talked about how she'd always wanted what was best for both of us. She did not, in 2 minutes and 31 seconds, use the word wedding once. I deleted none of them. I forwarded all 12 to my own email with a subject line that read 3/15 voicemails. Preserved. Then I called the legal counsel for our hospital and asked, hypothetically, what the duty of a cosigner was when they suspected misuse. He told me, hypothetically, what a cosigner's rights were. He told me, hypothetically, that if my name was on a financial instrument without my knowledge, I should pull my own credit report before doing anything else. I thanked him. I did not pull the report yet. I had one stop to make first. I drove 3 hours to Knoxville on Wednesday, March 18th. My father was home. He was always home on Wednesdays. He'd retired from full-time contracting last year. He took small jobs now, for friends. On Wednesdays, he sat on his back porch and read the paper. I didn't call ahead. He opened the door. He looked at me. He didn't ask why I was there. "I'll put on the coffee," he said. "Sit down." We sat in the living room. Same brown couch he'd had since 1998. Same coffee table with a single cup ring he'd never sanded out. He came back with 2 mugs and a folder. The folder was thick. Brown cardstock. There was dust on the top right corner. "I've been keeping this," he said. "I told myself I'd never show you. I'm glad you came before I had to." He set the folder on the coffee table between us. He opened it. The first page was a photocopy of a private student loan application from January 2022. My signature was at the bottom. Brooke L. Palmer, co-signer. "I knew about this when she did it," he said. "She told me you wanted to. I knew you didn't. I knew she made it sound like you did." I stared at the signature. "Why did you save these?" I asked. He looked at me. "In case you ever asked." I sat back against the couch. He sipped his coffee. "Dad, how long have you had this folder?" "Since May of 2018, 6 years and 10 months. I add to it when something new comes." "How often do you add to it?" "Not often, maybe twice a year. Sometimes she goes a long time without doing anything I can put on paper. Then she does." I looked at the folder. It was maybe 3 inches thick. 6 years. What else is in there? He turned the page. It was an explanation of benefits from a company I'd never heard of. CrossPoint Health Supplemental. The policyholder line said, Brooke L. Palmer. I didn't have a CrossPoint Health Supplemental policy. The claim was for 12 physical therapy sessions. CPT code 97110. Provider: Whitman PT Clinic, 4218. Magnolia Avenue, Knoxville, TN. Total claim paid $7,800. Dates of service: October 14th, 2023 through December 21st, 2023. My brother had been in Nashville from October 1st onward, sleeping on a couch at the Vanderbilt Athletic Dorm. He had not driven to Knoxville for physical therapy. He had not driven to Knoxville for anything. He never went, I said. He told me, my father said. He told me last Thanksgiving. He didn't think anything of it. He said his shoulder felt fine. He said Mom told him not to bother. I looked at the policyholder line again. My name. How did she open a policy in my name? He took a slow breath. She has your social. She has had it since you were 16. She did this before. From 2014 to 2017. 3 credit cards. About $14,000. I found out in May of 2018. I told her she stops or I leave. She chose. I left. I held the EOB in my hand for a long time. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. He looked at the ceiling for a second. Because I didn't want to be the reason you stopped loving your mother. I wanted you to figure it out yourself. I was hoping you never would. And the credit cards, from 2014 to 2017, did you pay those off? He nodded. He didn't say anything. How much? It's done. Don't think about it. Dad. He looked at me. His eyes were tired in a way I had never seen on him before. Not in the hospital, when his own father died. Not at my college graduation. Not at the barbecue. I sold the boat, he said, and I took out a small line of credit. I paid it off over 4 years. Your credit was clean by 2019. You never knew because there was nothing for you to know. That was the point. I put my hand over my mouth. He cleared his throat. Don't, Brooke. I don't want you to do that. I made a decision. I'd make it again. Dad. Brooke. Listen to me. I would have given you anything to keep you from finding out who she was. I failed at keeping you from finding out. I did not fail at the rest of it. I put the EOB back in the folder. He turned one more page. It was a handwritten note, his handwriting in pencil on a piece of yellow legal paper. The date at the top said May 11th, 2018. Brooke. She does this? She has always done this. I left because I couldn't watch her do it to you anymore. Whatever you decide to do, I will stand behind it. Dad. I folded the note. I put it in my pocket. I said, I need to go to Owen's office tomorrow. My father nodded. You don't owe me anything, he said. I want you to know that. I know. And whatever you decide, wherever you draw the line, I'm there. I stayed for another hour. We didn't talk about her. We talked about the apartment. He asked if Owen liked Tennessee whiskey. I said yes. He went into a cabinet and brought out a bottle he'd been keeping since 2019. He said he'd been saving it for a wedding he thought he might never see. And he poured an inch into a paper cup for each of us, and we drank it standing in his kitchen. He hugged me at the door. He's not a man who hugs. He held on for a long time. Drive safe, he said. Call me when you're home. I drove home. I called him. He answered on the first ring. The envelope he'd given me on the morning of the wedding was sitting in my purse. I opened it in the car, in the driveway, before I drove back to Nashville. Inside was a copy of the same handwritten note, same yellow paper, same date. He'd kept the original in the folder and put a duplicate in my hand on the day I got married, in case I never asked. He'd been ready for 6 years. I cried in the driveway for about 3 minutes. Then I drove home. On Thursday, March 19th, I went to Owen's office after hours. He was finishing notes at his desk. He looked up when I came in. "I need you to tell me something, but I need you to be careful how you tell me," I said. "I don't want you to violate HIPAA. I want you to tell me what the standard care plan looks like after a labrum repair, and whether your office has any record of any kind of a referral to a clinic in East Knoxville called Whitman PT." He looked at me for a long second. "Standard care after labrum repair is 12 sessions," he said. "I can tell you, generally, that our office has no record of any external referral for Hayden Palmer to a clinic called Whitman PT, or to any clinic outside of our system. That's a billing fact I can confirm without opening his chart. The discharge sheet I signed in September of 2023 specified pre-approved external providers with documented referral. There was no documented referral." I took the discharge sheet out of my bag. I'd kept it in the bottom drawer of my desk for 2.5 years. I laid it flat on his desk, next to the EOB. He looked at both pages for a long time. "This is fraud, Brooke," he said. "This is federal." "I know." "What do you want to do?" I sat down on the edge of his chair. I said, "I want one conversation, then I want my Saturdays back. I want to be specific about what I did over the next 5 weeks, because the version of this story where I just decided everything in one night isn't true. The first week, I called a family law attorney I'd worked with on a hospital matter once. Her name was Holly Briggs. She charged me for 40 minutes of her time. She told me that having a supplemental health policy opened in my name without my consent was identity fraud. She told me that being a co-signer who had been deceived about the use of funds was a civil matter at best, criminal at worst. She told me I could pursue both. She told me, gently, that pursuing both would cost me 5 years of my life. She said, "Most women in your situation use the threat. They don't pull the trigger." I asked her how to use the threat without lying. She told me. She also told me to do 3 things in writing before I sat across from her. Pull your credit report. Save every communication. Decide what you want before you walk in. Not after. I wrote those 3 down on a new index card. I keep new index cards now. Habit from a different room. The second week, I pulled my credit report at annualcreditreport.com. It was free. I'd been doing it every 2 years since 2019. I had never looked at it carefully. This time, I did. CrossPoint Health Supplemental was listed under my insurance accounts. Opened February 14th, 2022. 3 weeks after I'd co-signed the first private loan for Hayden. It was not the only thing on the report I hadn't authorized. There was a small store credit card from a furniture store in Brentwood, opened in November of 2023, with a balance of $212 and a payment history of current. I had never been to that furniture store. I had never bought anything from that furniture store. The card was paid every month, on time, by an account ending in numbers that did not match any of my accounts. She'd opened a card in my name and then paid it on time so I wouldn't notice it on my report. She had been protecting her own infrastructure. I sat in my home office with the printout in my hand, and I understood for the first time that the loan and the CrossPoint policy were not isolated incidents. They were a system. She had been running a small, careful system on my name for years, and the only reason she'd never been caught was that she'd never let any of it default. I called Holly Briggs back. I added the furniture card to the file. She said, "Document everything. Photograph the reports. Keep the originals." I did. The third week, my mother's calls slowed. 8 calls Monday, 5 Tuesday, 2 Wednesday, then nothing for 2 days. Then a text on Saturday morning. "Brooke, I'm scared. Please." I didn't answer. That same Saturday, I drove out to Brentwood. I parked across the street from the furniture store and I watched it for 10 minutes. It was a small place, family-owned. The owner was a man in his 60s who waved at customers through the glass. There was nothing wrong with the store. The store had no idea what had happened. The store was just a name on a piece of paper my mother had used to keep her system tidy. I drove home. I didn't tell Owen what I'd done. I would tell him later. The fourth week, I drafted 11 sentences in a notebook. I wrote them. I crossed them out. I wrote them again. The first draft was angry. I crossed it out. The second draft was apologetic, in the way women learn to apologize even when they are the ones owed an apology. I crossed it out. The third draft was 11 sentences long. I read them out loud in the kitchen at 6 in the morning, with Owen at the counter pretending not to listen. I asked him at the end if he wanted to change anything. He said, "This is yours. Say it the way you need to." I made one small change. I added the word Hayden in sentence 3, where it hadn't been. I wanted her to hear his name in the same sentence as the word learned. I wanted her to know I had been adding things up since I was 10 years old. The fifth week, I sent a text to my mother. Bridgepoint Coffee, Sunday at 2. 20 minutes. No Hayden. She wrote back within 40 seconds. "I'll be there. Thank you." That thank you was the first thing she'd said to me in 5 weeks that didn't sound like fear. If you've ever built a folder for yourself just to prove you weren't crazy, drop a comment with just the word folder. I'll see it. Let's keep going. Sunday, April 26th, 2026, at 2 p.m. Bridgepoint Coffee in Brentwood. A booth in the back corner I'd specifically asked for when I'd called the manager on Saturday. Public enough that she couldn't make a scene. Private enough that no one would lean in. She arrived 15 minutes early. She was wearing her church clothes. Her makeup was careful. She had a small leather purse in her lap. I sat down across from her at exactly 2 o'clock. I had a notebook in front of me. Closed. I had a small folder next to it. Closed. She opened her mouth. I held up one finger. "I'm not here to argue," I said. "I'm here to inform. I have 11 things to say. Then I'm going to leave. You can speak when I'm done." She closed her mouth. I opened the notebook. I read. 1. I know you've been calling. I'm not going to apologize for not picking up. 2. The event on March 14th was my wedding. I married Dr. Owen Caldwell. You met him in 2023. You posted about him on Facebook. You don't remember. 3. The reason I didn't tell you it was a wedding is that I learned, a long time ago, that anything I tell you becomes something you use. I learned that from Caleb. I learned it from the scholarship in 2010. I learned it from every Saturday of my childhood, where Hayden's name was the only name in the room. 4. There is a supplemental health insurance policy in my name, Crosspoint Health Supplemental. Opened February 14th, 2022. I never signed for it. I have the credit report confirming when it was opened. 5. There is an explanation of benefits from Crosspoint for 12 PT sessions at Whitman PT Clinic in Knoxville between October and December of 2023. Hayden never went to that clinic. Owen's discharge instructions from 2023 never authorized that clinic. The claim was for $7,800. I have both documents. 6. There is also a small store credit card at a furniture store in Brentwood opened in November of 2023 in my name. I have that on the credit report as well. Dad has kept a folder of your activities since 2018. That folder is what made him leave. 7. As of May 1st, 10 days from now, I am no longer paying the private loan I co-signed for Hayden. I have paid $890 a month for 34 months. That's $30,260. I want that money returned. I'll accept a payment plan. 8. If you do not return that money, and if you do not close the Crosspoint policy and the furniture card under my name within 30 days, I will refer the matter to the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance. They handle supplemental fraud. I won't be the one pressing charges. They will. 9. I am not reporting you today. I am not pressing charges today. That's a choice I am making. It is not absolution. 10. You can have my silence about Crosspoint conditional on the terms I just said. You cannot have my time. 11. For 16 years you called my milestones little events. Saturday was not little, and neither was I. I closed the notebook. She didn't speak for a long time. Then she did. "Honey," she said, and her voice cracked. "I didn't know it was a wedding. If I had known—" "That's not what you owe me an apology for," I said. "And I think you know that." The silence that came after was the first silence in my entire life that I did not lean forward to fill. I let it sit. She put her hand on the table. She tried to reach toward mine. I moved my hand into my lap. "You're my daughter," she said. "Brooke, I'm your mother. We can—" "Please don't say we." She stopped. "I don't want you to make this harder," she said. "I'm not making it harder. I'm making it clear. There's a difference. You taught me the difference. It just took me 30 years to learn it." She wiped her eyes with the side of her thumb. She had not cried out loud. She had only let her eyes get full. She was very practiced at this. "What about Hayden?" she said. "He doesn't have anyone else. You know that. If you do this, Hayden is 22. Hayden is an adult. Hayden also signed paperwork at a clinic he never went to. I'm not responsible for him anymore. I haven't been since he was 19. I just hadn't told myself that out loud." I opened the folder. I slid 3 papers across the table to her. The first was a written notice that automatic payments on the private loan would terminate on May 1st, 2026. The second was the calculation of what she owed me, $30,260, and the proposed repayment terms. The third was a single sheet titled Future Contact Terms. It read, "No drop-in visits, no phone calls outside of agreed-upon windows, no discussions of money, no discussions of Hayden. 1 holiday per year, in a public venue, 2-hour maximum. All future communication in writing." She read it. She didn't speak. I stood up. My coffee was still full on the table. I left it. I walked to the door. I turned around once. "You can have my silence," I said. "You can't have my time." I walked out. Owen was waiting in the parking lot in his car. I got in. I closed the door. I exhaled. He didn't ask. I said, "Done." He drove us home. 6 weeks later, I want to tell you what happened. Not what I imagined would happen. What actually happened. On May 1st, the automatic payment to the private loan stopped. I'd given the bank 90 days' notice. There was no drama. The line item just disappeared from my checking account. On May 6th, my mother sent me a single text. I sold Hayden's car. $14,200. I can wire it Friday. I wrote back. Friday is fine. Use Zelle. Include the words loan repayment in the memo. She did. She signed a simple promissory note Holly Briggs drafted for the remaining $16,060, 12 monthly payments starting June 1st. No interest. I didn't ask for interest. I wasn't a bank. On May 12th, I received written confirmation from Crosspoint Health Supplemental that the policy in my name had been closed, and that any further activity on that policy would trigger an internal fraud review. I filed the confirmation in a fireproof box at home next to the marriage license. The furniture card was closed on the same day, with a final payment that came from an account I did not recognize and did not ask about. I did not refer the matter to the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance. I had the option. I chose not to use it. That was my choice. Not absolution. A choice. On May 18th, Hayden sent me a long text. It said, "Sis, I'm sorry, Mom is crazy, you know how she is. I never meant for any of this, and I love you." I read it. I didn't answer. I didn't block him. I left him in my contacts under the name Hayden with no special letters or warnings. I just stopped responding. There is a difference between cutting someone out of your life and refusing to keep arguing with them. I learned that difference. I am still learning it. My father started coming to Nashville on Sundays. It started without anyone planning it. The first Sunday in May, he texted that he had a job in Brentwood on Monday and asked if he could come a day early. I said yes. He stayed for dinner. Owen grilled chicken on the back porch. The next Sunday, my father came again. No excuse this time. He brought a bouquet of magnolias from his yard. He set them on the kitchen counter. He said, "This is the first family dinner I've had in 8 years where no one was performing." He's come every Sunday since. I keep one of the magnolia blossoms dried on my desk in my home office. I keep it next to a small wooden frame. Inside the frame is the index card.